And so my understanding is that this crime of greed that spanned many years didn't stop on its own. It stopped because you were no longer able to access her accounts, and then the crime got discovered.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
In your application, you've indicated that you directed the victim to write out checks to your plumber, electrician, roofer, and tradespeople. So
Yes.
this wasn't something behind her back. She
Right.
may not have understood what it was you were asking of her, but there's a level of exploitation in doing that to this elderly victim that really stands out for me.
There is a popular saying, crime doesn't pay. But sometimes that just does not seem to be the case. Now, is it because some people are maybe in the top 1%? Law doesn't really apply to them? Or is it just that they might be really good at committing crime? I don't know. But we are about to see the pardon hearing of a woman who is a financial advisor for someone who was, well, on a cognitive decline. Now, she was alleged, I need to be careful with the words that I use, but ultimately found guilty of stealing upwards of $1 million. Now, she never spent a day in prison. She got probation. And furthermore, because of statute of limitations, the only records that I could find is that she was required to pay restitution of $14,000. Now she is asking the Board of Connecticut to grant her a pardon so that she can expunge her record as if none of this has ever happened. So let's take a step back, let's take a seat, and let's watch justice play out.
Please state your name for the record, ma'am.
Paula Halloran.
Thank you. At this time, you may explain to the board why you believe you are suitable for an absolute pardon.
Okay. Thank you for your consideration for an absolute pardon. I'm here to take full responsibility and apologize to the victim's family. I deeply regret the choices I made 16 years ago, and I've had time to reflect and find a way to honor the victim's legacy. In 2012, I started a business that provided safe, reliable transportation for senior citizens, including a group of cloistered nuns. The victim died in 2014. I was never able to apologize. Sorry. However, the best way I could honor her was by helping others, as she had done so generously throughout her life. My crime is larceny. There's no programs. Probation was my program. My probation officer, Chief Ed Conway, made a huge impact on my life. He listened without judgment when I couldn't see any possibilities. He told me that my life was not over and gave me hope. For me, probation was a place where I could seek advice, guidance, encouragement, and sometimes refuge. My court-ordered probation ended over 7 years ago. However, we remain in contact. Since my crime, I also became a mother. I tried to set a positive example for my daughter. A pardon would be life-changing for both of us because it would allow me to be more present in her life by volunteering. Today, I'm seeking a pardon for high school volunteer opportunities. This past summer, I completed an independent educational consultant certificate program and started a business that provides customized scholarship reports for students seeking higher education. I help them find and apply for scholarships that target their interests and hobbies so they have a greater chance of success. I believe education should be accessible to everybody, regardless of financial situation. Currently, my felony prevents me from volunteering in the public schools. Specifically, a pardon would allow me to volunteer my services to inner city high schools, first generation and low income students who are interested in pursuing higher education. In the past, I made many bad choices. I believe that I can still make an impactful and positive contribution. And I'm seeking a pardon to remove the barrier so I can help others pursue their educational goals and dreams. A pardon would make this goal a reality and be the last step in my rehabilitation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Halloran. For the record, the State's Attorney's Office of Stamford Norwalk does object to you receiving a pardon because of the seriousness of the crime. It's one of the many things that we consider. We did receive a reference letter from your probation officer as well. Let's see, Ms. Palmieri.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Ms. Halloran, I appreciate your comments earlier. I was reading through your application, and I did note that part of your reason for wanting a pardon is so that you could travel with your daughter to a school that she was accepted in out of the country. Is that still something you were hoping to do?
It is not. Unfortunately, actually my husband had a stroke last year, and 5 months later, on Veterans Day of all days, he was actually in an accident in 95. He was in traffic, and he was hit from behind by somebody under the influence, and it caused a traumatic brain injury. So I won't be traveling. I'm her sole parent. So,
Sorry to hear about both
Yeah.
of these medical problems, conditions. So we do have an objection from the state's attorney, as the chair mentioned, and is states because of the magnitude of the crime. I mean, I know that you were charged with a felony in the excess of $700,000 of embezzlement. However, it does extend even beyond that. I do recognize that restitution was paid through many different avenues of assets, but it's hard to get by the crime in itself, that you were had this responsibility, this fiduciary responsibility to this elderly woman, and you took advantage of her diminished capacity at the time, her mental diminished capacity, as she was going down the road of dementia at the beginning and well into it at the end of your scheme. Can you talk a little bit about what was going on? I read that you were building a house, but the monies that you stole went way beyond construction of property.
At the time, it was 2005. I was building a house in Rhode Island. I had a relationship with the victim. I had a personal relationship as well as a professional. I had known her since 1995. I know that the majority of the money was used for the building. As the building went on, I remember it kept going further and further away, where I just wanted it done. And of course, at that time, conditions were like the market was falling apart, and the real estate market was falling apart. This is like 06, 07, 08, around that time. I just became more and more deeper into the hole. It's like I couldn't get out of this hole. I don't, really know how else to explain it. It just kept going further and further. It's almost, I remember wanting to refinance, and then I could pay everything back. But, it just kept going. I mean, I ultimately was laid off from my job, and that's what stopped everything. And at that point, I knew I had to pay the money back, and then I was trying to figure out how to do it.
Well, I mean, I think you were let go from your job once.
Yes, I was laid off.
Fraud was uncovered.
Actually, I was laid off for a different reason. The company was going through it. They actually went through we're going through a merger, and I was not a high enough producer. It was a commission based.
Okay.
So,
all right. I thought the dates coincided with the end of this offense.
It came 6 months later, but I mean, it would have come out either way. I don't think it made a difference.
Okay. And I did hear, and I think we can kind of see how, the dominoes kept falling and you couldn't catch up. But there were a number of checks in very, very large amounts when you go through the offense conduct. And some of them were for expenses outside what one would consider construction of
Okay.
a home, such as there's one to, I made a note, a casino in Atlantic City for vacations, restaurants, clothing, vacations. So
I know I used a charge card, and that's what I, use this card, and I use it for everything. I don't think that I broke it out. I, didn't think like, this is just for construction and this is just for life.
So it's what we come down to is that the money went way beyond, was really for
Oh,
your
definitely.
pleasure, more or
Yes.
less, for your living, for your
Yes,
beyond your living expenses.
yes, definitely.
You said you had this personal relationship with the victim. Why
Yes.
didn't you reach out to the victim's family to explain or ask permission or bring them into what was going on? Instead, as she continued to decline, you continued to take more money, larger amounts of money.
That's a tough question because there were other nuances in that, and I last year I submitted the court transcript for that reason, because there were
Mhm.
certain things that were specific that the judge had brought up, as far as reaching out to the victim's family. So I don't know really. I can't really speak on that, just because I don't want to contradict what the judge said on the record.
Yeah, well, I'm not really, I read the transcript also, and
Okay.
I'm not really thinking about what the judge said at the time of sentencing, but when you, in 2005, 6, 7, before all this came to light, why would, you knew the victim really wasn't in the
Yes.
right state of mind to give permission to make these loans to you?
In 2005?
Well, there's checks. I know the conviction is between 2006 and 2008. That's the date of the checks that you were convicted for.
Yes.
There is information that there's a statute of limitation and it went prior to that.
Yes.
So even if you want to focus in on just the offense itself that you were charged under, 2006 to 2008, why wouldn't you, during that time frame, obviously the victim was unable, it appears from what I could read, give you permission to accept loans or even be aware of these promissory notes that were supposedly put in place? Why wouldn't you reach out to the victim's family as a secondary for permission or to discuss what was going on?
I don't know. I mean, I know that she did know I was building the house. I think though in 2005, to be honest with you, in 2005, and she was aware. I mean, she didn't like wake up one day and also, get Alzheimer's. I mean, it was progressive. It wasn't like in one day that all of a sudden I saw this drastic difference and I immediately, knew. I got to be honest, I didn't think that was the case. Certainly early on, I did not see that. But yes, towards 07, 08, definitely. I definitely knew. And again, like I was really hoping that if I could just sell the house or if I could get a loan, I could take care of it.
Yeah. And some of the money there were large checks that paid for your condo as well, your primary living residence, correct?
Right. In 05, there was one. Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
05. Yeah. 2. Right. So, in your position, as a financial advisor, we look at that as a breach of trust.
Right.
You really have, you're considered the expert for many people who don't have the financial savvy to invest their money. So when you ask for a pardon, I can't help but think down the road that should you decide to get back into this type of work,
Oh, I can't.
that there could be victims again down the road.
No, I actually can't. The reason though is I took a voluntary ban. And I was laid off in November of 2008, and in November of 2009, if you're not with another firm, your license expires. And I got a phone call and they said, do you want to, are you going to continue in this field? And I said, no, I'm not continuing this field. And I actually took, for that reason, I took a voluntary ban. I said, I don't want to work in that field again. So there's not, there was no possibility of me going back into that field.
I did look that up because I saw that reference
Yeah.
in the transcript. So I did look it up and I did see your signature on that document. But if it's a voluntary ban, what prevents you from going out and try to be licensed again when this would no longer be on your record?
Because it's based on your social security number, which is your trading ID number. So it would come up, it would well, it should come up. And
Mhm. Okay, thank you. I don't have any further questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Turner?
So Ms. Halloran, you indicated that the victim died before you were able to apologize.
yes,
Is that correct?
that's correct.
Okay, so in these crimes, as my colleague has indicated, spanned a number of years and came to light in 2008 when you were laid off.
Mhm.
And then you were convicted in 2012
Correct,
and she died in 2014.
correct.
And in that time, you never reached out, never apologized, never said in court that you regret.
No, during that time, no, because there were other additional litigation going on. And so I was not able, my lawyer said, I shouldn't communicate while there was active litigation going on.
Is that because you would be admitting to the crime by way of an apology,
Is that what he said was?
or your understanding?
No, my understanding was I wasn't supposed to communicate with her. In the criminal court, they said because of her diminished capacity, there should be no communication. That's what I was told.
And so my understanding is that this crime of greed that spanned many years didn't stop on its own. It stopped because you were no longer able to access her accounts, and then the crime got discovered.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And in your application, you've indicated that you directed the victim to write out checks to your plumber, electrician, roofer, and tradespeople. So
Yes.
this wasn't something behind her back. She
Right.
may not have understood what it was you were asking of her, but there's a level of exploitation in doing that to this elderly victim that really stands out for me. So I wanted to put that out there that, it's concerning. Are you currently holding a job?
I just started this scholarship business. I can't go into help any of the schools here, the high school in Bridgeport, because of my felony record. So unfortunately, I've just been doing it pro bono and word of mouth. Just until I can't be around kids. I understand that because of my record. So in order for me to help the kids get scholarships for the colleges, they have to find me. Because I can't go to them.
Okay, but
So I am working.
you-
Yes, I started it in September. It hasn't been a great success, but it's also early.
okay. But your intent is for this to become a business that you get paid
Yes.
for service?
I hope so. But I mean, in the meantime, I had done it for some friends, and that's how it kind of came about. A friend of mine was a divorced mother. She had children going to college. She said, I need to figure out how to pay for college. And I said, there's all these scholarships available. There's books on scholarships. There's, companies give scholarships. And I started doing research. And then I put together a database. And, just said, there's a lot of money out there for anybody who wants to go to college. There's really a lot of money available.
Yeah, so you're
Um,
connecting students to
I'm
those.
trying to put them, but I'm trying to put them, the students, I'm trying to put them with their hobbies and interests because they have a better chance of winning the scholarship. If it's something that they're, interested in, if they're going for nutrition versus just sending anything out.
I'm sorry to hear about your husband's accident. I've been rear-ended on I-95 myself, and it's traumatic. And his injury sounds incredibly severe. So, are you the sole provider for your family at
I
this
am right now. My husband's, he is a retired firefighter. He was a 9/11 cancer, so he actually is a retired firefighter. He does get a pension.
Okay,
So I can't say I'm the sole, no, but I am the sole caretaker for him and my daughter.
okay.
Yeah.
So, when you run into financial, difficulties and, a squeeze on your budget, how do you cope with that?
Well, it's a good question. I think one of the things that is a lot different now is my lifestyle is a lot different now. It's actually much easier as far as, until we just sold our house and we're renting a place. Um, I've been fortunate not to run into financial difficulty, but mostly because I'm on a very strict budget. So that helps. And we did have a business, transportation company. So that was, that we did have another income up until, it closed.
Okay, so the senior transportation that you established in honor of the victim in this crime does not operate anymore.
It doesn't. It closed in 2022, between COVID,
Sure.
and the drivers were all retired police and firefighters and corrections officers. A lot of them, actually retired and left the state. Just COVID kind of changed a lot for us.
I guess my last question, and really trying to appreciate how this all came about. It seems to me that you embarked on an endeavor to build your dream house without actually having the foundation financially to do that.
Yes.
And with your access to resources, you exploited your professional position, sabotaged your reputation,
Mhm.
and caused great harm to this victim
Mhm.
in betraying her trust.
Mhm.
So why would you make choices to live beyond your means in such an extreme way that you know, imploded your whole life?
Yeah, I think that I would probably answer that by saying I think when you're in an environment that's it's a very fast environment. It's the way the Wall Street firms, people, there's a lot of money around you. People are living very high on the hog. And they don't necessarily have the resources. But I think you sort of get into that mindset, where it's not even a matter of did you earn it? It's just a lifestyle. That's the only way I could really describe it. It seems like it's a lifestyle. Now, I'm not around any of those people anymore. I don't have any contact with them. I don't know where they are, honestly, and truthfully, I don't know if they know where I am. It just once you leave, things become much more clear.
So do you think and perhaps this is unfair to ask, but do you think what you were doing was not uncommon practice among your colleagues?
Living beyond your means, I would say that's a pretty common practice. Yes.
Uh-huh.
I would say but no, stealing, no, but living beyond your
Exploiting your
means, yes, I
clients?
would
Okay.
definitely, I have to say that would be, yeah, I think people do live beyond their means.
Uh-huh. And what do you think feeds into that sense of entitlement?
I think a lot of it's really insecurity. Yes, some greed, some childishness, but I think insecurity. I think trying to keep up with the Joneses, like that saying, trying to keep up with the Joneses is what really, yeah.
Have you faced civil action?
Yes. We did.
Thank you for talking with me. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no more
Sure.
questions.
Thank you. Well, Ms. Halloran, it does appear to me that you are remorseful for your actions and that you've learned quite a bit since your offense. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
a lot of negative consequences, but I certainly appreciate that you would like to continue to give back to the community, and I hope you will follow through with that regardless of financial gain. In the matter of Paula Halloran, I'll make a motion to grant an absolute pardon. Ms. Palmieri,
Aye.
Ms. Turner,
Aye.
my vote is aye. The pardon is granted.
Thank you.
Best of luck to you.
Well, they granted, and who says crime doesn't pay? Certainly looks like it did in this case. And I'll tell you, I did not buy in that crying at all. That looked like one of the most classic cases of a fake cry that we have ever seen. You know, it's quite hard to keep a fake cry going, but you know, to her credit, it looks like she was prepped, she was prepared, but she forgot to bring the tissue. She forgot to lift her glasses and wipe her eyes. It's really interesting how some people have the ability to cry without tears. Do they call it crocodile tears? I'm not sure. But the board, they pardon her. They pardon her. Can you even imagine that in her opening statements, she says that to give back for what she did to an elderly person going on cognitive decline was to provide services for elderly people through car transportation? Are you kidding me? What? And then she wants to become an independent advisor to help connect students with finding grants and things like that. You know what you can also do in this role, because I looked it up. You become an IEC, an independent educational consultant or a counselor. You know, and the idea is for that, and I'll just show it to you. You can pull it up on any, you know, here's a website, for example. An independent educational consultant is a skilled professional who guides students and families through the process of finding, selecting, and applying to a college, school, or program that is a personal best match. It does not have to be with finding scholarships for those who are in financial need. No, it can also be for someone who wants to help very, very, very wealthy people place their children in really fancy schools. I don't know. I doubt any that can be at all used in any type of way. I'm just saying. Anyways, you know, you have to be very careful what you say. I have seen there's a, you know, it's scary. It's scary. Everything I'm saying, just remember, I'm pulling it off the internet. Don't quote me on it. Do your own research. This is just my opinion, not facts. Okay. Let me preface with all of that, because frankly, some people, I think, they don't just think they're above the law, but I think it seems to me like maybe, you know, you can get away with it. She's lucky that she didn't snatch a purse. She's lucky that it was only more than $1 million that she stole while she was a financial advisor for a top financial firm, right? Right? Because you know, if she stole a purse, she might actually still be in prison. But hey, what do we know? Still $1 million, or you know, let me just read to you one article over here. Now this was interesting. Her husband was not pursued, so he's mentioned, but then it's struck from a lot of the records. They ended up saying that they're not going to go after him, that he didn't know about the crime. People were saying that, well, how's it possible he didn't know? Apparently, he had credit cards that were tapped into the incoming money. How would it have been possible? But ultimately, they ended up not charging him. But Michael and his wife Paula both pled no contest to first-degree larceny, conspiracy to commit first-degree larceny. Michael was considered null during the pre-trial, according to the court clerks, meaning that the criminal charges against him will no longer be pursued. Now, Halloran received 5 years probation and ordered to pay $14,000 in restitution. How is that justice? You are ordered to pay $14,000. You're alleged to have stolen more than $1 million, but you have to pay 14 grand back and probation. And remember her opening statement? She's talking about probation like it was the most severe form of punishment. Oh, I did this, my probation, I did this and I did that. The probation, they don't have programs, but it was like, this is it. We saw it in real time. The justice system at its best. All right, I'll put a link to this in the description. There are a bunch of more articles about this and the crime. It was actually the biggest fraud ever done in that little town. So, you know, this was a big story. It's quite the story that she befriended. And, you know, she's, in my opinion, it shows clearly also that she's fired by the firm. And that's what ultimately led to them investigating her books. And my guess would be is that that firm notified all of her clients, hey, we found our, you know, but it's funny. This is not what I would call justice. This is what I would call the system working for the very few, the very privileged. And we're about to watch another commutation hearing of a man who might fall under that category, a former professor who was found guilty of essay of a student and now asking for a pardon. He also served no prison time. With that, let's jump in.
Former professor at Central Connecticut State University is under arrest. Police say he sexually assaulted a student. NBC Connecticut's Jamie Ratliff live in New Britain with the story. Jamie.
Well, Keisha, CCSU police are in charge of this investigation. The university is not giving a lot of details, but...
Good morning. My name is Attorney Gillette. I'm here with Mr. Gula. I will be making a brief statement, and then Mr. Gula will also be making a brief statement. Mr. Gula sits before you today applying for a pardon for his 2017 conviction. This would be his second application for a pardon. The first was heard and denied back in March of 2022. Since 2022, Mr. Gula has engaged in counseling on a monthly basis consistently for the last 2 years, which I'm sure he would be happy to go into greater detail about. Mr. Gula has focused on working through his concerns with anxiety, depression, and impulse control, all of which contributed to the events leading up to his underlying conviction. Mr. Gula has been very interested in applying for a position within the Peace Corps, but has been unable to make it past the application stage. They're currently willing to hold this application for another few months pending the outcome of this hearing. And again, he's happy to discuss his position or his desire to be in the Peace Corps in more detail, but his long-term goals are ultimately helping people and bettering local communities. Mr. Gula understands the gravity of his conduct and the impact he made on the victim a decade ago, and he sits before you today asking for a second chance. He has made tremendous strides over the last 10 years to better himself, but especially within the last 2 years by attending counseling. So I'd ask you to consider granting him an absolute pardon. And now Mr. Gula would like to give a brief statement to the board.
Thank you.
Thanks again for offering me this opportunity. I know I've caused the victim great harm, and I know this by way of the harm that I caused my wife at that time, the trauma. She took a leave of absence approximately 6 weeks after this incident, and for about 6 weeks was sleeping 3 hours a night for 6 weeks. And I took her we went to 3 differing emergency rooms, medication, and counseling, and approximately a decade later, she's still undergoing, as I am, counseling. So this incident I've caused great trauma, pain, lifelong trauma and pain to many people that I love. And Martina, my ex-wife, she will never be able to be a mom, as was the plan. The 6 decades of my life do not point, the life that I've lived, do not point to this incident at all. And currently seeing a therapist, and he assists me in recognizing and controlling any impulse impulse controls, impulse issues that I have, but he also assists me in recognizing all that I've achieved in my life and the contributions that I can make, and the fine qualities that I do have. My life has been utterly transformed by this, not only professionally, but financially, socially, etc. And I would like to, with my hard-earned skills, assist others in helping themselves, hence the Peace Corps, and individuals, a nation, a community, the world. And finally, I'm presently working at Electric Boat in Groton, and my security clearance is being reviewed per this, my incident, and it could be revoked. So that's pending, and at any time I could lose my employment there for this circumstance. So
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gula. Mr. Pohl?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the fact that Mr. Gula went back and entered further counseling on this since his last hearing. I certainly can appreciate the collateral consequences he's facing right now. And I certainly hear the remorse that he has for what he did. So I really don't have any questions. The application for me speaks for itself.
Thank you, Mr. Pohl. Ms. Chance?
So I just wanted to ask Mr. Gula, what about the victim? Have you?
As I had mentioned, I, since that time, have not met or heard from, of course, the victim in court. Did we see each other as I was sued civilly? But I know she must be suffering, as my wife did, losing 35 pounds and emergency rooms and medication. And so I can't fully begin to imagine what the victim might have had gone through, considering the fact of my wife, we were living together at the time, what she was what I put her through, and as well, her parents and my family and friends, acquaintances. So I know that the victim, she'll, for a lifetime, like my wife, will suffer this.
I guess I just wanted to hear a little remorse for the victim, Mr. Gula.
I feel terrible for her. I mean, I can only imagine that she's suffered. I know, say, my wife has, and I feel terrible that I've caused someone this severe pain, trauma.
I'm all set, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Gula, I had a similar concern that I think Board Member Chance was alluding to. You spent a lot of time in your opening statement speaking about how your incident, which isn't an incident, it's your crime, affected you and your family. But we certainly don't want to lose sight of the fact that you did have a victim, and not just the victim herself, but her family, her fellow students, and the university as a whole. So I'm happy to hear you express some remorse. You certainly have worked on yourself, and you're right. Outside of this conviction, you did lead a very productive, successful life. So I hope that you and your family can put this behind you. In the matter of Daniel Gula, I'll move to grant an absolute pardon. Mr. Pohl?
Aye.
Ms. Chance?
Aye.
My vote is aye. The pardon is granted. Congratulations, sir. Thank you, Attorney Gillette.
Thank you.
Allow me to vent about the hypocrisy of this case, about the complete disregard for the victim, or dare I say, survivor. You know, this is madness at its finest. Yeah, Connecticut, I know that you appreciate and value your professors, but when someone comes up here and asks for a sacred pardon, something that to expunge his record, to remove from his record what he did to this woman who was in this college trying to get a degree. And I'll go through the details of this case. She fought to make sure that he had a record, not for financial gain, not because it was cool. No, this was 3 years before the Me Too movement took off. She was practically in this alone. And as a matter of fact, after this initially happened, she went on the record to say, I don't want to press charges. I just want it so that he doesn't create other victims. I want him to not be a professor here. And then when she found out that he had resigned instead of getting fired, and that he had then gotten a job at a all-women's school as a professor, it was only then that she said, no. Now I'm going to press charges because, again, I'm doing this to make sure he doesn't create more victims. And he shows up here and he starts rambling on about his wife, his now ex-wife, how she's the victim, the only victim. It is nonsensical. When I first listened to this, I had no idea what was going on. I was trying to come up with what it was because I thought maybe he was a doctor and he'd given medication to his wife and he had done something wrong to her. And then I sent the info to Sir Richard. Sir Richard said, no, this has nothing to do. All he did was talk about and then he spoke about her again. And he's a professor. He knows what he's doing. He has an attorney. How do you grant him? You don't deserve a pardon. You haven't even acknowledged what you've done. Forget about protecting others from your wrath. Oh, you can't make this stuff up. You know, the people put on this board of pardons, they're handpicked by the governor. And Connecticut, you know, they certainly, I don't think, have a reputation of being friendly to perpetrators in the Me Too movement. I don't think they really like people who sexually assault students. But apparently, all the redeeming factors we just saw of this professor that just blew them away. And by the way, this wasn't the first side of sketchiness of this case, and I'll go through the details of the documents of it. But he actually filed an appeal to a judge to throw out his confession, which would have been used in the sentencing process, and a judge agreed. So a full-blown confession that he had made, my understanding of what it was, that he had given a written confession to the staff, to his bosses, to the college, that he had done everything that she claimed. The judge threw it out because he wasn't read his Miranda rights. But mind you, it wasn't the police that he confessed to. He confessed to his boss. They were going to read him his Miranda rights. Oh, Connecticut, they love their professors. This stuff is gold. I mean, I hope that I hope that you just can't make it up. Now, let me share with you again. Let me share with you the article. It's titled Shattered Trust, and it's written by the survivor. It's written April 19, 2017, and I want to point out that is still many months before Me Too went viral, October 15th, 2017, and also want to point out that this initial case happened September 23rd, 2014, but because of all the dysfunction or because of how long the process takes and how they're really dragging this through the mud and everyone was against her. Like I said, a judge even threw out his confession. It took a long time. Now, I'll read this article for you. Shattered Trust, CSU, the student that was sexually assaulted by the professor that resigned and later taught at a women's college. And I do believe that I read somewhere that this was his third women's college that he chose to be a professor at. I wonder why. Although room 212 by Willard Hall is no longer in use, the traumatic memory of what occurred there still exists for former Central Connecticut State University student. This is where she was sexually assaulted by then Professor Daniel Gula. According to multiple court documents, she said that her attack happened when her guard was down the most and in broad daylight. The location was without a doubt safe. It wasn't in a dark alley, in a dark parking lot, or in a parking garage. No, it was on a state university campus. It was around 5 p.m., the sun still out and shining bright, when she walked into his office. Classes were all around. Students and faculty members walking in and out. I can see the students and professors teaching in the rooms, doors open. She said in the victim impact statement to the court. Before the assault, she said that she respected the professor. After she met him through a chance encounter, they spoke about Italian culture and museums and had previously met in his office before where they shook hands as she left. She never expected that weeks after meeting him, he would trap her in her room, grab her breast, grind on her buttocks, and expose himself to her. According to the arrest warrant, she met with the professor, and I'm only calling him the professor, not out of respect, because I want to emphasize that he was a professor. She was a freshman in college, maybe just 18 years old. On September 15, 2014, to discuss an event she had attended. They conversed in his office, and the professor shut the door due to the noise. Once the door was shut, the conversation then shifted with the professor playing with his wedding ring and saying, "Shiny, shiny, pretty, pretty." She thought this was odd and got ready to leave for the class. It was then that the professor asked for a high five instead of the normal handshake that they do. Shortly after, he asked her for a hug. As they hugged, it was then that he squeezed her so tightly that she heard the professor's shoulder pop. The hug was the only way to restrain me, she said in her victim impact statement. She still remembers how she was backed into a small corner of the room as the professor began to sexually assault her. He backed me into the wall between the first desk in the room on the left and the bookshelves on the right. The area felt small. I felt trapped. I remember feeling like my brain was numb and my body was numb all over. I couldn't think clear. It was registering what was happening to me. It wasn't registering what was happening to me. It was as if my brain was on overload and wasn't connected, she said in the victim impact statement. Cunningham told police that the more she tried to get away, the more aggressive the professor came. I kept trying to pull his arms and hands off my breast and body. He was untouched by my words to stop. He continued pulling and grabbing at my breast, she said in the victim impact statement. Cunningham said the event lasted 8 to 9 minutes. Can you imagine 8 to 9 minutes? It was never ending. She was fearful that if she screamed, the professor would do something else. And please, I want to point out again, this is before the Me Too movement. She did not want to press charges. She only pressed charges when she found out that he had resigned instead of getting fired and took a job at another college. That was the first time that she actually pressed charges, because she wanted to protect other students, okay? My thinking wasn't clear, but I was terrified and numb. If I screamed or made any sudden moves, I didn't know if he would strangle me to shut me up. She's genuinely in fear. His hands had been so close to my neck. I had no idea who this monster was. I had no idea what else he was capable of doing, she said in the victim impact statement. She told police that she was unable to yell but she did manage to convince the professor to stop. She then escaped the room and went to the class, although she was very late. Days later, with the support of her friends, she went to the Women's Center and reported the assault. The case was then passed to the CCSU Office of Diversity and Equity. According to the arrest warrant, CCSU police then spoke to the professor, to her, and she told them about the assault that had occurred. Later that day, the professor came into the CCSU police department to speak to them. According to the arrest warrant, he was told that he was not under arrest and could leave at any time. According to the arrest warrant, the professor adamantly denied any sexual misconduct, only stating that he gave her a hug. The police then told the professor that she was not going to press charges, and they were looking to get the truth to close the investigation. It was then that he admitted to the assault and signed a sworn voluntary statement attesting that what he did to her was true. After the interview was over, he was allowed to leave in the police station and according to the arrest warrant. So I guess I was wrong about the initial part about him confessing to the staff. Although it could be that maybe he did confess to the staff and later confess. I'm not quite sure where my lines might have crossed, but this confession was overthrown by the judge because he was not read his Miranda rights. Cunningham said in the victim statement that the CCSU police told her they had took the professor's badge and keys and fired him, but they lied. They didn't fire him. And then she elected to be withdrawn from her courses and was issued a refund. Months later, according to an investigation report done by Chief Diversity Officer Rosa, the report concluded that the professor violated the Board of Regents and Connecticut State College and University sexual misconduct, sexual assault, and intimate partner violence policy. The conclusion of the investigation was that the case was completed and closed as the professor resigned from his position before the investigation was completed, according to the report. So before, it's like they take care of their own. Because you resigned, we're not going to continue the investigation. After the professor resigned from CCSU, he then went on to teach at the University of St. Joseph, a mostly female university. The professor was an adjunct faculty member here from August 24, 2015 to September 4th, 2015. Wait, what? He was there for like a few weeks? He was there for a second. Tell me that's a typo. You gotta be kidding me. Almost a year after the assault, she decided to press charges when she discovered. See, this is a year after she decides to press charges. And again, this was because she found out that he was not fired and that he was working in another university. She feels she was betrayed by CCSU because they allowed him to resign, thus allowing him to go to teach at other universities. I believed he was fired. I believed they took his badge and keys the day he confessed. I believed this would forever stain his teaching record. After all, it was a criminal act, a felony, and 2 misdemeanors, and not just policy violations. I believed that a university had obligations by the law to ensure the safety of their campus and other campuses, she said in the victim impact statement. And I want to point out, some of you might say, well, why was she not here speaking at the pardon hearing? Because they do allow victim impact statements. And there's a few potential reasons for it. One is it's possible they cannot locate her. 2 is it's possible that when she got the notification, she was it's hard. It's very difficult. Sometimes they get very little notice. And it's hard for you just don't know what people are going through. There could be many different reasons why. And we won't know the answer to that. On August 14, 2015, along with CCSU victim advocate and violent protection specialist Sarah Dodd, met with CCSU police where Cunningham then pressed charges, and he was arrested for 3rd-degree sexual assault, 2nd-degree unlawful restraint, and disorderly conduct. The professor pled no contest and was found guilty of 2nd-degree unlawful restraint, 1st-degree reckless endangerment. He was sentenced to 1 year suspended jail and 2-year probation. According to her, a judge suppressed
his confession because he confessed under the impression that he would not be arrested. Oh, that's why. It wasn't even because his Miranda rights. I thought I wouldn't be arrested. That is ridiculous. Again, that's a judge siding with the professor, in my opinion, because how many times have we seen in the true crime community where a police officer would say, don't worry, just say it, you won't get arrested. Or in so many words. I mean, how can you win the argument of I was under the impression I would not get arrested? She did file a civil suit against him, and she's being represented by this attorney. But again, keep in mind, this is years later. The event took place more than 3 years ago, and she's still suffering from post-traumatic stress. And this was, again, I want to point out this, there are articles written about how upset she was immediately, with how it happened, not 3 years later. It has affected everything in my life. I would say prior to this crime against me, I was a strong woman, able to overcome anything. I believed in myself. I could count on myself. Now I live in this place that is guarded by fear and unknown. I have never been so scared, humiliated, degraded in my whole life. I've lost my independence. She is haunted by what occurred at CCSU and how administrators handled it. She wants students to know of what occurs behind the closed doors. Students and campuses have a right to know what happens on their campus. That's what an institution fails to address. The horrible acts of faculty members or anyone committing such violations of law and criminal courts will serve justice and hold the individual accountable. I had no control over the investigation by CCSU police. I had no idea my life would be changed forever after this crime. CCSU police had an obligation to proceed this assault for the crime, to process this assault for the crime that it was, a sexual assault, she said in her victim impact statement. And he makes a mockery of the court. Within, 7 years of getting getting sentenced, he now has his record expunged as if it had never happened. He has no redeeming factors. He showed no empathy. On the contrary, he had a bizarre, wacko hearing where he spoke about his ex-wife as her being the victim of his sexual assault of a student. That is insane. You do not reward someone with a sacred pardon. You do not now make others potentially vulnerable to him. What will stop him from becoming a professor again in the future? What will stop him from preying on other potential victims? This is pure insanity. What frustrates me, what really gets me going is the idea that I think 99% of people watching this would have been shocked that he had gotten a pardon. It was probably the worst statement we have heard from anybody requesting a pardon. And he was given a cookie at the end of it. Make it make sense. And with that, I'll let you go.
Yeah, Mr. Gula, I had a similar concern that I think Board Member Chance was alluding to. You spent a lot of time in your opening statement speaking about how your incident, which isn't an incident, it's your crime, affected you and your family. But we certainly don't want to lose sight of the fact that you did have a victim, and not just the victim herself, but her family, her fellow students, and the university as a whole. So I hope that you and your family can put this behind you. In the matter of Daniel Gula, I'll move to grant an absolute pardon. Mr. Pohl?
Aye.
Ms. Chance?
Aye.
My vote is aye. The pardon is granted.